This podcast begins with a walk, a literal one, around the island of Montreal. In 2003, I chose to walk a loop around the island, photographing all the sidewalks on the opposite side of the street. The project, based entirely on an intuitive urge, took 9 days. It was during this time that I started to reflect on the connections between photography and walking. Of course, I knew walking was part of some photographic genres, especially street photography. But at that point, the link felt matter-of-fact, as if walking were simply a functional part of the process, like the roll of film in the camera itself. My story is unusual in a way. Photography wasn't something I fell in love with as a child. I discovered it in my early 20s, after receiving my first camera. I quickly became fascinated with learning how to use the equipment, develop film, and make prints in my kitchen, which doubled as a makeshift darkroom. I still vividly remember the first time I developed Tri-X film in Rodinal Developer and printed my first contact sheets. I always waited until sundown to avoid light seeping in around the kitchen door. The smell of the chemicals, the red light, the silence. Something clicked, if you'll excuse the pun. Looking back, I see the connection between the solitary act of walking and the magic of the photographs slowly appearing in the developing tray. I began as a dilettante before choosing to study photography formally in a fine arts program and eventually pursuing it professionally. In those early years, I was captivated by documentary photography. Even during my career as a fashion photographer, I regarded my images more as documents than as fashion statements. I was fascinated by the world around me, and by the fact that I was able to observe and record it, even within the setting of editorial work. But that was before my walk around the island. Until then, I had believed it was always the photograph that prompted the walk. This podcast series will explore how the relationship between walking and photography isn't always so straightforward. Since that walk, photography and walking have become something of an obsession, one that has inspired various projects, photographs, and studies in art history. It all culminated this year, in fact, in a doctoral thesis on the subject. You can follow these explorations and see some of the related projects on Instagram and my website, both under the title Photography and Walking. When we look closely at the relationship between walking and photography, we uncover more than a casual link, like a stroll in the park. It's a complex relationship tied to art histories, photographic practices, and theoretical paths that shape how we understand both walking and the image. I'm creating these podcasts to share my passion and invite you to see photography and walking in a new light as forms of art and ways of thinking. You'll find the podcast on Instagram at Photography and Walking. If something in this episode speaks to you, a memory, a thought, a question, I'll be glad to hear it. Feel free to leave a comment there or visit photographyandwalking.com. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy what's to come.